Journey to Truth podcast is brought to you by Omnia Radiation Balancer. Omnia Radiation Balancer is a device that protects against the microwave radiation that we're bombarded with every day from the cell phone towers, Wi-Fi routers, smart meters, all of it. Tim Sanders, who we've had on a previous podcast, has developed a solution that negates the threat to our vibrational body from these microwaves. It's a patch that you apply to any radiating device, such as a phone, laptop, like I said, smart meter, microwave, Wi-Fi routers, all of it. And it's proven to reduce DNA damage, reduce stress, headaches, anxiety. It helps improve blood circulation, immune system function, energy levels, sleep quality. There's a whole laundry list of stuff it does. For more information and to purchase one of these patches, click the link below at omniaradiationbalancer.com. We hope you're enjoying the podcast. Thanks for watching.
Boom.
Hey, welcome to Journey to Truth podcast. Tonight we are joined by Leon Isaac Kennedy. Leon is a writer, actor, producer, director. Some of you may recognize him from the movie Penitentiary from 1979, which I had not seen. Aaron and I just watched a few clips of it prior to this. And man, Leon, you were a badass in that
Awesome.
No, it was pretty cool. But most recently, he probably is best known now for producing and starring in The Cosmic Secret, the documentary, which just aired on iTunes and Amazon and all that. So we're going to turn it over to you and let you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's good to be here with both of you. It's my pleasure and my honor. So with Cosmic Secret, we go back to, first of all, Above Majestic, and we go back to me working with great people, working with David Wilcock, working with Corey Good, working with Roger Richards, working with Jordan and Michael Sala, Dr. Michael Sala, and so many people that were in Above Majestic. And then people that segued into Cosmic. So first of all, it's wonderful to be around all these people, John D'Souza, and I could go on and on and on because there were many, many people that made contributions. And how would I say this? Above Majestic sort of hit you right, boom, 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 with a lot of information. And that information might have been jarring to some people.
Oh, yeah.
But nevertheless, pardon me?
Disagreeing with you, yeah.
But nevertheless, truth can be jarring. Disclosure can be jarring. Putting the pieces of a puzzle together can be jarring. Change, true change, is always very jarring. So Above Majestic could be jarring. If you didn't see it, I would suggest you see it because there was great information in there. Now with Cosmic sort of took that information and then shows you how to, from the inside, absorb things and change, if that's making sense. So one was from the outside, one is getting to the inside, and both of them are really great teaching tools.
Yeah, and I like what you said. You go into this documentary as a student, as more of just, as opposed to entertainment, you just, because there's so much to learn, and it takes more than one watch to really take all that in, because there is a lot of information there.
Absolutely. You mentioned some of my former films, and most of my former films, I was an action star. So in Penitentiary, I was fighting my way out of the penitentiary in Penitentiary 1, 2, and 3. Body and Soul, Muhammad Ali, the great Muhammad Ali, when he was at the height of his popularity, was kind enough to come and star in Body and Soul with me and taught me how to box as a young boxer in that movie. Lone Wolf McQuade with Chuck Norris, David Carradine. Chuck and I were the good guys. David was the bad guy in that, David Carradine. And I guess Chuck and I probably shot up and beat up probably 50 people. And then a strange thing happened. I was really not just called, but yanked into ministry. And that's when my spiritual journey began. Now, I was always a spiritual person, but you know, Aaron and Tyler, you can be a spiritual person, not really know it. You know,
Yeah.
as a little guy, a kid, I was always seeking God. I just didn't call myself a spiritual person. Um, I remember being 4 or 5 years old, people asked me, well, Leon, who's your hero? And I said, Jesus is my hero. That lasted till I was about 12. And then, you know, I thought, well, you know, that's not a good thing to say. So, you know, it was like, okay, I need to be more, it just seemed like you would get a lot of ridicule from that. So I didn't say that anymore, even though it was still in my heart. And I was always a truth seeker because I remember as a kid, they had comic books. And in those comic books, you could join the Rosicrucians. They had the coupon in the comic books. But they said, you know, John Kennedy and Benjamin Franklin and other people were Rosicrucians, and they got to go into the supernatural and learn more, and they got more wisdom and more enlightenment. So I said, well, I want that. And so I clipped out the coupon and sent away, and they wrote back saying I was too young to join at that time. So I was always seeking. If maybe I didn't know it, but I was always seeking, and I was always fascinated with the supernatural. I was always fascinated with the unknown. And then, you know, you go through different cycles. So then you start trying to figure out who you really are as a person. You're growing up, you're a teenager, then you're a young person trying to get your career together and all those things. But all along, I was still a spiritual person, even though I maybe did not express it. And I was still seeking truth all along the journey. I remember years ago, and now we're talking about maybe 1971, 72, before two of you were born. But I was the youngest producer over at NBC. And I told them, I said, I want to do a whole show on ETs. And they said, Leon, nobody's going to want to see that. It's too far out, and so on and so forth. But I finally convinced them, and I got Stanton Friedman, the great Stanton Friedman,
Nice.
to be on the show, and many other people to be on that particular show. So way back in the 70s, I was into this arena and trying to put fact and truth out.
So did you, have you ever had any actual ET experiences yourself, you know, earlier on or even recently? If you don't mind answering that, I'm curious.
Well, I'll share a story with you that I've never shared this one publicly. My family knows this, but the public doesn't. So you're getting an exclusive.
Nice.
I was probably, maybe 9, 10 years old. And back then, I never could figure this out, guys. The high school kids, now this is Cleveland, Ohio, okay? So Cleveland, Ohio is cold and dreary for a long time. You know, you got cold, dreary autumn, and the winters can be brutal. I don't know if you remember the story, Christmas Story, the movie. They showed it. Okay, they do marathons with Christmas Story. When you see that little kid dressed up like a space cadet with the heavy hood and the goggles and the suit and the boots and all that, and he's walking like a penguin, that's real. That's how we had to dress up in Cleveland to go out and to meet that blizzard condition. So I never could figure this out. The high school kids got to stay in high school for lunch. The junior high kids got to stay in junior high school for lunch. And yet the little kids, the kindergartners to the 6th grade, we had to go to school, to elementary school, and then at 12 o'clock, come all the way home for lunch, have lunch, and then go all the way back to school. So we had to make the trip twice as much as the older kids. I never could understand that, and we were too young to complain.
Wow, that's crazy.
So we're waddling out in that cold weather. So I'm setting up the story. So this particular day, I and my brother John are coming home for lunch, and I've got a friend with me. And all of us were latchkey kids back then, even before the phrase latchkey kids was ever invented. In other words, you had your key to the house hanging with a chain around your neck. Parents weren't there because they were working, and you'd come home and fix your own lunch. So that particular day, I go to open the door, and as we go to open the door, inside the house, we hear these voices. Now that was bad enough because nobody was supposed to be there. But these voices were talking in English, but they were talking way much faster than anybody could talk. And it couldn't have been anyone's imagination because none of us looked at one another. None of us said anything. None of us said, "Did you hear that?" Instead, we went like that, and all three of us started running out the door at the same time. Okay, so we get outside the door, and I'm still, composed because I'm thinking this is a TV commercial. Somebody has their TV on loud. So I'm standing outside and I'm listening. Nothing. Silence. So that shook us up. What was this voice? What was this inside? We don't know. We're shook up. We didn't eat lunch that day.
Really?
So we go back to school. Now we come home. This was not a good day because as I came home, I'm really getting off script here, guys, but you are getting an exclusive. That is the same day that Superman killed himself. It's on the front page. What was his name? George Reeves?
Yeah.
George Reeves that played Superman on the Superman series had supposedly shot himself in the head. So this is on the front page of the evening paper. So now you've already heard voices that afternoon. Now you see that your hero Superman has shot himself in the head. It was not a good day.
A bad day.
For a young kid. So we're not going home. We're not going in the house. We're going to go someplace else until our mother gets home. So we go to a friend's house. And once again, as a young kid, you want to say something to an adult to get a little encouragement. So her name was Mrs. Hill. And I said, "Mrs. Hill, when we got home for lunch, we heard voices inside, but they were talking real fast. And we don't think that they were normal voices. Ronnie said they might have been aliens." And she said, "Oh, that's nothing. We get visited by ETs all the time."
Wow.
Matter of fact, I've been abducted.
Wow.
I said, "What?"
Excuse me?
I didn't know what being abducted meant.
Yeah.
So then she told me all types of stories. She told me a story about one vision that would come into her room, but it was almost like electrical. It was like neon sign lights all through the body and so on and so forth, and the glow and all that. So she told me many stories that day, and the rest of several days. So I don't really know how to take all this, but that was my beginning of hearing about ETs. And then I started reading different books, and quite frankly, at that point, I was no longer afraid. I thought it would be so great to meet one and become friends. I'm wondering all the great things that they could tell me. And then as I got older, I also said, if I was just totally rich and never had to do anything else in life but whatever I wanted, what would you do, Leon? And I said, I think I would just spend all my time traveling and investigating the unknown.
Wow.
And so now to be in this circle where daily there's all types of information coming in, and then also with my spiritual background that I have gained throughout these decades, it's a fascinating adventure. So that's a long-winded answer to your question.
Well, no, it's perfect. It's no accident why you're here today doing this. I mean, you were introduced to it so young, and I mean, from my understanding, aliens and alien abduction was like pretty taboo back then. A lot of people didn't talk about it. So to be having that discussion with your teacher, that was happened for a reason, obviously.
Yeah, and then I got fascinated by things like the hills, Betty and Barney Hill, and when I first heard about what happened to them. But see, the fact that they could have a regression and then draw a constellation that people could not see without one of the most powerful of telescopes, then how do you explain that? How do you explain the Dogon? Here's a tribe, now they're telepathic. They really had much of the same knowledge that the ancient Egyptians had, but they had not been studied as much because they didn't have the riches that the Egyptian culture had. But now, how did their shaman know about this star and the density of that star? And how would they, people that weren't even versed as far as reading history, much less constellations and so on and so forth, how did they know how to draw a certain constellation and show that particular star? How did that shaman, and they were able to pass it down generation after generation, know that, okay, in this 70-some year cycle, this star is going to be closer in its orbit? There is knowledge that we get that is unexplainable.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, that constellation that he drew was actually, if you were looking at it from the other side, not from Earth, but you're looking at it towards Earth. So that right there just like puts the icing on the cake for that particular case.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to touch on something that happened in Hawaii at Cosmic Waves. So you know, aside from the movie and the producer, you're also a healer. And down in Hawaii, you performed what you call spiritual surgery. And honestly, it was the best part of the trip for me because I was sitting down with my notepad ready to take notes like I was for all the speakers. And within minutes, the entire room was bawling their eyes out, crying, but in a good way. I received a powerful healing that changed me forever. And I want to thank you for that, for one. And I want you to explain, you know, because you bring the whole new aspect of something to this community that we hadn't had before and we need so bad. So if you want to touch on some of that.
Sure, I'll be glad to touch on it and explain it. But before we do that, I'm very interested because I always like to see what the power of the Holy Spirit did. So, and for those watching, can you explain a little bit about what you experienced? What first of all, what you felt happen in the room, and then what you actually experienced for yourself?
You started talking, and what I think at one point you brought us back to our childhood. I don't remember exactly because it was so emotional. But what happened to me was like some past trauma from when I was a child that I didn't even know I was suppressing came to the surface and was shown to me in my mind like a photograph. And it was as something I knew I had to release and I knew I had to heal. And I was down at Cosmic Waves for information, not for healing, you know. So it was totally caught me off guard and I couldn't help but to cry. I was releasing this suppressed trauma, this, you know, this stuff that I had no idea that I was holding back. And
Hmm.
it allowed me to advance spiritually and just in life in general. And that's in a nutshell what happened.
And when you say you were changed forever, explain that.
Uh, it seems like we get to a point in life to where we just like we hit a dead end, and you just can't. You don't know where else to go. You know what you want to do, but things don't always work out. And
Hmm.
I had no idea that that was what was holding me back. So
Hmm.
after that trip, it just seemed like all the pathways were open. Like I could just the door was open, and I knew exactly what I had to do. And we started a podcast, and all this stuff just started aligning. And it just seemed like that was the one thing that was holding me back. So
You know, that's so great to hear, Tyler, because actually what happened since then is you've accelerated. And that's the great thing about the Spirit of God, that it can make moves in your life. It can do, it can accelerate things in your life that normally might take 5 years, 10 years to do. Now it takes you only 6 months to do it because of this acceleration. You know, they say that the anointing breaks yokes, but the anointing can also transpose a life. I can talk about in the Bible, there was Saul, and Saul was a nobody, but he got anointed to be king, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, he was a king. So just to go back, you asked me to explain what happened. Uh, I studied very hard for the mystical and the supernatural aspects of Christianity. In other words, if we're related to God, if we're sons and daughters of the Most High God, then we should be actually different than other people once we realize who and what we really are. And if I study the life of Jesus, well, he would teach, he would preach, but he also would heal and he would deliver. Now, people called what he did signs and wonders and miracles, but he simply called it, I'm doing my Father's business. So it was an everyday occurrence for him to heal and to get people set free. And so many times, if you tap into the supernatural, then it's no longer the supernatural. It becomes an everyday occurrence for you once you learn. Now, it's the same thing to an extent when it comes to science. Let's take the law of electricity. Well, before, people were stumbling around in the dark when they were cavemen. Stumbling around in the dark, they were cold, and so on and so forth. Why? Because they had not discovered the law of electricity. So once you discover the law of electricity and know how to use it, now it's important to know how to use it, because that same electricity can heat your home, light your home, run your appliance, or electrocute you, depending on how you use the law and how much you know about the law. So it's the same thing now in the spiritual. There's great power if we learn it. So when we go out and minister to people, we try to take people from one level to another. So if a person is stuck, we do a spiritual cleansing to get them set free. Now, it depends on how far you want to go. There are negative forces out here. There are dark forces out here. Whether people want to admit it or not, there are. It's like people don't want to admit gravity. Well, gravity's still going to work on you, whether you would say it's around or not. So it's the same thing when it comes to dark forces or negativity. So sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's very overt. But I think that everybody from time to time needs what I'll call a spiritual cleansing. So I can call it a spiritual cleansing. I can call it a spiritual detoxification. I can call it being set free, depending on how far you want to go. Some people can call it deliverance. If it's really, really overt with negative things, you know, the Roman Catholic Church gets into exorcism, but it's all within that same realm. It's getting a person free from that negative and that darkness. And it took a lot of training. It took a lot of prayer time. It took a lot of hanging out with God. What do you mean by that, Leon? It means that many, many times for days, not just an hour, but for days, I would just be alone, but not really. In other words, I was alone, but with the Spirit of God, really praying and really listening and really trying to learn and hear. And then if there was someone that excelled in prayer, or if they excelled in what we do, whether you call it deliverance or being set free, I would get with them and study with them and be part of their services just to learn. I would sit in on healing services where I really saw people be healed, not just here in America, but in Africa or other places in the world. I traveled all around the world, guys, to learn because I was hungry to learn. In other words, when I left Hollywood, and I left Hollywood, I was in a pretty good place. You know, it's hard to make it in Hollywood. So many people, it's called the Dream Factory. So many people come to this city with great aspirations. They come by plane, they drive, they come by train, Greyhound bus, but they come with their dreams and their aspirations. And unfortunately, most of them don't make it. And this town can really kick one in the rear very severely. I've seen people very traumatized. I've seen people come in full of ego and ambition, and they end up leaving sometime with nothing. I've seen certain people come and in 5 years, 10 years, they look 40 years older because of the ravages of what this city can do to a person. I've seen people completely beat down. So to make it is difficult. So when I was doing my films, all of my films were very successful. They all made money. They were popular. I was box office all around the world, not just here in America. So that's a lot to walk away from, especially if it's something that you wanted to do and worked hard to do it since you were a kid. So if I'm going to be in ministry, then I wanted to really excel and really help people. It was not about having a title. I never used titles. It was not about being big in ministry. I would literally sneak into cities. By that, I mean, no PR, no publicity. I didn't want movie star comes to so-and-so venue or movie star comes to so-and-so church. I didn't want that. I just wanted to come in and let God show off and change people's lives. So I worked very hard to learn these things. And then it would be so rewarding to just be able to come in and set an atmosphere. I call it setting an atmosphere for miracles. It's a certain way of praying. It's a certain way of intending. It takes prayer work before you even get there. But in setting that atmosphere for miracles, and then the power of the Holy Spirit comes in. And after that, anything can happen. And you know when that power is there because it could be hundreds of people, and each one of them has had their own individual experience. In other words, Tyler, what you were going through was just for you. And with the person next to you on the right and left, and the person behind you and in front of you, they were going through something that was just personal to them. But guess what? The Spirit of God knew what each one of you needed. So it's wonderful to be part of that.
Yeah, and that's what felt like happened. The whole, like you said, the whole atmosphere changed, and you just become emotional without even knowing why. I didn't even know why I was getting emotional, but then I soon realized. But yeah, it's powerful stuff, and if it's at all possible, I think that you should, keep doing that at conferences, because especially people in this community, we're so sectioned off. We feel like we're not part of the real world anymore, or the matrix. It feels like, we're outcasted or something. So there is a lot of healing that needs to be done, because we've dealt with a lot. So if I urge you to keep going and doing that.
Well, thank you for that. I have to thank Roger Richards, because he is the one that set that up with Joan Ocean. And I said to Roger, I said, Roger, I don't know if I'll really be accepted in this community with this type of ministry, because my ministry background is Christianity, and there are so many people in the metaphysical community that they're turned off by any form of religion. I said, but by the same token, as I've sat in on these conferences, see, that's another thing. I can be around a person and pick up on their energy. I can walk into a room, and in that room, there might be hundreds of people in that room. And even the person in the back of the room, I can still feel their energy. And then Spirit is telling me and showing me what they need. So saying that, I had been to many conferences, and I could feel what people needed. And it was like, okay, but how do I get it to them? How do we get it to them? So Roger encouraged me. He said, really, Leon, it's just terminology that keeps a lot of people apart. He said, so if you're just a little more careful in the terminology that you use in expressing things, he said, then they'll get it. This community will get it. And he said what you said, Tyler. It's very much needed. So I, going to Jones, I had a lot of apprehension, because I didn't know how things were going to go. And I didn't want her to say, oh my goodness, I brought Leon in here, and it was a disaster. And I just did a lot of praying about it, and I tiptoed through it, because I didn't turn the power up too high, because sometimes the power can get so high, people just start falling out. We call it the anointing. It's like, the anointing is like, I call it God's electricity. It's so, an electrical force can just knock you down or knock you out. But something happens good when this hits you. So I didn't want that to happen, because I didn't want to scare people. I've been in services where some people have run out of the room, because it was like they didn't know what was happening. They couldn't take it. So I've had to learn how to adjust certain things. But the meeting, that particular meeting, went very well, and Joan was happy, and she said, Leon, it was phenomenal. Everybody really got a great help and a great blessing. And then Corey and Adrian invited me to do DOD, and that went extremely well. So yes, we do want to do a lot more within this metaphysical community, which is now my community.
Yeah, it's beautiful too. I noticed in Hawaii also, you got in and swam with the dolphins too.
Yes, that was quite an experience. What an experience, really, to be in the ocean and swim with not just a dolphin at an aquarium or something, but live dolphin, and a whole school of them come by, and you can hear the clicks, and you can hear the sonic ways that they're talking to one another, Tyler and Aaron, and it was just an amazing experience is the only way I can put it, and especially for someone that doesn't really swim. Now, Maureen, my other half, teases me all the time because she's the swimmer, and she teases me all the time. Well, Leon, you know, you're a grown person and you don't swim. And I said, well, Maureen, let me explain something to you. You were raised near Santa Monica. You went to the beach during summer vacation all the time, almost every day. You learned to body surf. Your brothers were surfers. You learned all that. I was a kid that grew up, and we had Lake Erie. And when I was a kid, Aaron, they would tell little kids, don't go into Lake Erie. It's too dirty and you'll get polio.
Oh, man.
So that's why I never learned to swim.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're in St. Louis, actually.
Yeah.
So we got the Mississippi River.
I got you.
Yeah. So
about it.
I know, Aaron, you wanted to ask him, we were talking earlier. Did you want to ask him what you were talking about?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to know, so I know you got called into ministry, you say, is how you kind of started initially your spiritual work, so to speak, and left Hollywood. And but I was kind of curious more the details of how you went from that to getting into this whole community. And I know you said you watched Ancient Aliens when it was airing, and that's how you knew about David Wilcock. Or
yes. Mm-hmm.
So was that kind of your introduction more into like that whole world, or were you already kind of into ETs? And
No, you know, as I explained earlier, Aaron, I've been studying ET and the supernatural and disclosure and all these things all my life. Now, as far as Ancient Aliens, Kevin Burns, who is the creator and executive producer of Ancient Aliens, is a good friend of mine. I've known and been friends with Kevin for over, I guess, 30 years. As a matter of fact, I was in his office as he was on the phone making the initial deal and talking about that. So that's how far back I go with Ancient Aliens, and it's one of my favorite shows. I've seen every single episode over and over. And David was always outstanding. And I was at an Academy Award party, and I'm walking around and saying hello to some friends and so on and so forth. And lo and behold, sitting over there on a couch by himself at the time was David. And I walk up and I say, aren't you David Wilcock? And he gives me a big David Wilcock smile. And he said, yeah. And we started talking. And I was taking some friends out to dinner after the Academy Awards. And I invited David to go, and he came with us. And we started talking. We talked for hours, and we've been great friends ever since. And it's really God connecting the dots. So I became great friends with David, and then, you know, met Corey, and then met Roger, and then met Jordan and Dr. Michael Sala and John D'Souza and Laura Eisenhower. And, you know, we just go on and on and on, met Tyler, met Aaron. And, you know, it's wonderful how God has been connecting the dots. And to take it a step further, I never knew if I was going to come back into Hollywood to do anything as far as writing and producing. I paid no attention to Hollywood for many years, over a decade and a half. And then when Spirit put it in my spirit, maybe now about 3 years ago, Leon, it's time now for you to come back to Hollywood. Use Hollywood as a platform to do good, and use the money to do good. And so I said to Maureen, well, been released to come back and we're going to just follow God's marching orders. So we started saying, okay, we're going to do films that are transformational films. What do you mean by that, Leon? Films that are still highly entertaining, films that are profitable, because if you have an investor, you want them to get their money back and a return on their money. But films that are transformational. In other words, films that contain the nuggets of truth that will change an individual's life and that will touch an individual's life and that will change society. So we started gearing up with some scripts that are going to be turned into major motion pictures that are going to be really good. And then the documentaries that we're lining up to do, all of them are in this format of transformational. Possessing the airwaves as a force for good is our model. So if you look at Above Majestic, it falls into that category. It had truth that most people don't know. It has truth that if you can take it and apply it to your life, and Tyler, you said it, you repeated something I had said before. When you look at Above Majestic, when you look at Cosmic Secret, you don't come just for entertainment. You need to look at it as a student 2-3 times and get out of it all that you can get out of it. Even take notes if you have to. And then the next step always is, how do I apply this to my life? How do I take this knowledge and apply it to my life so that I can be a better person, so that I can extend this by sharing it with others? For example, Cosmic Secret. I think it would be a great Christmas present. Why? Because all of us know people that we would like to share some of this knowledge with, but with some of these people, it's hard to have that conversation. You know, we start that conversation and it's like we get a little shy, or we start this conversation and they back off a little bit. Or with some people, it's like, no, maybe I don't want to go there. With a friend, with family, with office people. But what if you just had a copy of Cosmic Secret and said, here, take this. It's my gift to you. Take a look at it, watch it for 5 minutes. And if it resonates to you, keep watching. If it doesn't, no harm. That would open up a conversation, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah.
I have to do that.
Yeah, start giving all my family, if the one of you who's listening, expect that gift for Christmas. No, I don't think it's any mistake that you are here allowing this information to spread worldwide to new audiences, because you're the key player in this as far as I'm concerned. We needed somebody from Hollywood who has connections and who knows what to do as far as making all the right moves to get this information out there, because otherwise, you know, it's a struggle. So I see you as like paving the way for this this information getting worldwide. And
well, thank you for that, Tyler. I really feel that it's a calling of God to do this. As I said, I see all the dots being connected, and I really think that we have to have our own. What do I mean? I mean that this truth-seeking community that wants to do good and that wants to change the world for the better. I think that we have to have our own money. Right now, I'm in the process of putting money together to do motion pictures, because you can't go hat in hand to the establishment, the same establishment that may be trying to censor you. They're not going to do your project. You can't go to banksters and expect them to give you money to fund you when you are exposing certain things and bringing out certain truths. So we have to have our own money. We have to have our own writers, our own stories, and our own way of putting them out and supporting them. So that's what I'm in the process of doing now, is lining up some of the movies, lining up other documentaries, putting money together so that we can do this and be self-contained.
And that makes perfect sense. And if you ever need any extras, you have my phone number. So.
Same.
Well, you know what? Both of you are naturals. So I'm sure there will be some parts in there for you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
It'd be amazing.
Yeah. So I know you didn't want to go too much further than we've gone now. Are you okay with the time, or do you want
to... we can do a couple other questions and then I'll bid adieu.
Okay, cool. So as far as I know, we're while we're on this whole Hollywood and Cosmic Secret, you said you have future plans for more documentaries and films. Is there a timeline on when we can expect maybe the next one to be rolled out? Are you comfortable talking about that, or do you know?
I would just say that more things will be coming out in 2020. Okay. When you're putting together a slate of things, sometimes you're not really sure what's going to come out first, but there will be documentaries and there will be movies.
Yeah, and I know we got a sneak peek of the 20 and Back movie in Hawaii, the Rip Reel or whatever.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the timeline is on that, but I'm extremely excited about that. That gave me chills, and it was just a Rip Reel. So.
Yeah, that's a great story. That's from certain excerpts of Corey's life story. So there's that movie, and then there's a television series. So that's very exciting. It will be very, very entertaining. And then there's several other projects that will be coming down the pipe.
Yeah, and we all know Corey receives a lot of backlash and all this stuff. What kind of backlash are you receiving from any of this, if any, or is it all positive?
Well, when you are dealing in spiritual warfare, like I do on a daily basis, then there's always backlash. So I've got to divide it in two ways here. One is Corey and David and some of the other people, they're getting more and more exposure now. In other words, in the old days in the metaphysical community, they didn't get as much exposure. But now with Ancient Aliens and now with social media and some of the other outlets, these people that have been in the trenches are getting more exposure. So as you get more exposure, you become a star within a certain niche. And with stardom comes good things and comes nutcases and stalkers and lots of other things. Now,
target.
Yeah. So because I've been in show business since I was 15, I'm used to it. In other words, as a disc jockey, back east, they don't have movie stars. So big time disc jockey, you are the star. So even at 16, 17, I've had shirts torn off me and things like that. Then as a movie star, I've always had people trying to get to my house, or people coming, trying to get to your hotel room and so on and so forth. And you just get used to it. And one of the things that I tell the guys when they get maybe a little upset, well, somebody doxed me and my house my address has been put out for the public. And I said, well, wait a minute. Imagine if you're a Hollywood star and there's someone on the corner selling maps to your home.
Yeah, and that happens.
So everybody knows. Imagine when the tour bus comes by and says, right there, that's where he lives. So unfortunately, it comes with the territory. So that part, I've just always, you just learn how to deal with it. Then when it comes to the spiritual part, when you have a deliverance ministry, you're dealing with the dark side all the time as far as the hits. So Leon, what do? I have to stay prayed up. I pray 2 hours a day. It keeps me on a certain level. It keeps me with a certain force shield that some of those fiery darts, some of those negative hits really can't get through. And then you get used to it, guys. In other words, you get to a point, and I said this in one of, I think it was DOD, when I was speaking to the audience. I said, what so many of you are going through, don't take it personal. It really has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the calling on your life. In other words, if you are called to be a light warrior, if you're called to be the light in your family, if you're called to be the light wherever you go, then the dark side doesn't like that. So their job is to keep you beat up and battered so that you never reach your potential. Because once you reach your potential, you are such a mighty force, and they don't want that force, which is you, that force, which is every single one of you that is watching, that can change the world one life at a time. So if we learn not to take it personally, that helps. And then when you start to study it the way I have, and you become experienced, then you learn that in so many instances, we're dealing with proxies, aren't we? Mm-hmm. I'm a proxy for the Holy Spirit. He wants to talk to someone today, talk through me. You want to love on someone today, do it through me. You want to encourage someone today, I'm your proxy, do it through me. Well, the dark side has proxies too. So they'll try to influence people to be negative. They'll try to influence people to be the backstabbers and the gougers and the this and the that. So many people, they're doing things and they don't even know why. Mm-hmm. They become a proxy. So when you learn these things, then it's like a giant spiritual chess match. Okay, the negative did this, I see it, it's coming through this person, but I'm not taking it personally with that person because it's not really Bill doing it. It's the negative using Bill right now. So they're coming at me with this, so therefore I have to do that. This deal didn't work because they tried to block it, so now I have to do this. Boom, boom, boom. It's a spiritual chess match, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's fantastic advice too. It's true, because sometimes I wonder, like, God, how can somebody be so rude or hateful? But you're right, it might not truly be them. It's an attachment working through them.
Well, it's because I truly believe underneath everyone's egos and unhealed traumas and wounds, there's love, and there is a good heart underneath everything and everyone. And but so many people are operating from this unconscious place of their traumas and wounds and their ego attachments and everything else. So when that stuff gets triggered or threatened, they're acting from that place rather than their true selves, really, is the way I've come to understand it. So,
you know, Aaron, that's a very good way and a very mature way of putting it, because one of the things that I teach so often is that people's impressions and people's reaction, it's not even your current reaction. Your reaction is from your trauma. The reaction that you had today, some of you, is from trauma from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what's triggering you to react this way or reject something right now, today, in 2019, soon to be 2020. So if you can get rid of that trauma, your reaction is going to be totally different. People are fighting old battles over and over and over, and they don't even know it.
Absolutely.
Which also might be the reason why a lot of people reject a lot of this information.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm connecting dots right now. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, it's true. you're reacting to something just like I was before Hawaii. You know, you don't realize it until you take care of it, and then it unlocks that door. So
yeah, because your spiritual eyes have opened more, so now you can see more, or your spiritual enlightenment has expanded, so now you can understand more. Then comes in some wisdom, and so you can deal with something in a whole different way than you would have dealt with it before.
absolutely.
Yep.
And don't get caught up in politics either.
Yeah.
I don't imagine that you do. If you spend 2 hours a day praying, I'm sure you don't waste any time with all this crap that we're seeing right now, you know, on the surface
Well, you
level.
see it for what it is.
Yeah, you see it for what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, you see it for what it is. You don't get caught up in it, and you end up with your own calling. In other words, as I'm starting my day, as I said before, I always open myself up as a vessel. And it's like, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to say? How do you want me to deal with this person, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll get your own individual marching orders. And if you do that, you don't really have time to be caught up in things that you shouldn't be caught up in. And then I also pray, Lord, let me see life and people and the world through your eyes, your heart, your spirit. So if I'm looking that way, then first of all, I'm not reacting on a personal level. And my heart opens so much, because if I'm looking at you through God's eyes, he loves you. And he's showing me the best in you. And he's making me love you. And it's very humbling, guys, because then you realize, like, we have a terrible, terrible homeless epidemic here in America. And it just brings tears to my eyes, because I can't help all of them. But for any human beings to have to say that our homeless are living in these United States of America is shameful. It's an atrocity.
Absolutely.
And when I look at them through God's eyes, I know that he loves that person who's laying in the street, maybe now not even in their right mind, maybe now with a stench to them. And yet I know that Spirit loves him and her as much as he loves me. So it keeps you humble when you walk looking through God's eyes and looking through God's heart. So just to close things up, back to Cosmic Secret for a moment. What is the big message? The big message is loving God's way and being of service to others. It's so simple, and yet it's so hard for most people to do. What did Jesus say? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So simple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we're all connected.
Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing, is realizing that we're all one, because we're obviously living in a program that tells you otherwise, you know, that teaches you otherwise. So to come to that realization, then you start realizing, you know, like you said, service to others is really service to yourself, because how you treat others, it's, and you know, the whole karma thing and all
essentially that. All the creator experiencing himself through each and every one of us, and like the law of one, that's where that kind of ties in to that, because it says when you see another, you're seeing the creator and another. So whatever you do to another, you're doing to yourself, because there is no other ultimately in a certain level. So it's like, you know, and this is where it starts to get, you know, certain people, because I used to be very Christian. I grew up very, very Christian, actually. And a lot of the things I see and believe now, I would have thought was blasphemy or, nonsense or even evil back in the day. But now I see it's just a greater perspective or a different perspective on the same things within Christianity, really, ultimately. And yeah, and it's like, why, you look at the world and it's so screwed up because so many people think they're all alone, and they think everyone's separate and they're alone, and there's there's no greater purpose or meaning to anything. There's no love, out there. They don't know about the Creator. They don't know about God, or that there's this loving whatever consciousness, whatever you want to call it, it exists
until they meet Leon.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's so real, but you don't know until you experience it. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like you can't come to it by knowledge alone, by just
researching.
Like logic and reasoning. It's right. You gotta experience it in your heart.
And Aaron, no scholar could have said it better. You can't get into spirit with head knowledge. Mm-hmm. It's really spirit to spirit, heart to heart. And it really takes humility. One of the problems is that so many people think they know everything, and they don't. None of us do. Yeah. But more of an atrocity is they're not willing to learn. They're not willing to explore. If we have the courage to learn and to explore, then we can evolve into new information, even in the spirit realm. Mm-hmm. What you're saying, Aaron, is certain things that perhaps you were taught in your Christian walk that were blasphemous. But then if we study more, we might learn that the early church, and I'm talking about the church in the 1300s or whatever, put in so many restrictions because they wanted to be the big deal. They didn't want the individual to really learn about God. So they made him this far off entity that you can't get to, that you can't know, that you can't experience.
It's up there judging everyone, but it's
angry.
Yeah.
Angry. And so they made it so you have to go through us. You have to pray through us. Mm-hmm. We're the only ones that are privileged to know this higher knowledge. And so we've learned that so many things that they said is not correct. Absolutely. And it was just a way to harness people and really enslave people, but in a different way.
Yeah.
So by learning and studying, you grow, you evolve, and then eventually you change. So I think that that's a good note to leave things off on. But before I go, I want to applaud the two of you for having this show, coming together and sharing this show and this type of knowledge with your audience. I pray that your audience grows and expands. For those of you that are watching this show, I want to applaud you because there are so many things I love about this community. But one of them is your courage, that you're out here on the front line, willing to learn, willing to explore, willing to pry into things, not just going along with the norm. And that takes courage. It takes courage to be different. And so I applaud you, and I send love to all of you.
Well, thank you so much. And I don't think we could have closed it up any better than you just did. So, we'll go ahead and end things on that note. Thanks again for coming on. It was awesome. Thank you for giving us your time. and sharing everything. The ET experience that we got to hear for the first time is pretty cool. And for our listeners, if we hear about this YouTube thing coming up on December 10th, if we get shut down, you can find us over on BitChute, Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of it. So there's other places aside from YouTube if something does happen. So look for us there. Thank you for coming on, and thanks for listening.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
All right, good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thanks, Leon.
My pleasure.
That was